introduce myself. May we introduce our other team members briefly before we start? Thank you.
My name is Wardell Castles. I am Commissioner Michelle Spears, appointed to the board.
Sorry, we can't hear you back there, but you would need to come to the mic.
I think I will do that.
Okay, whoever is going to be introduced, if you could come on to the mic.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
My name is Wardell Castles. I am Commissioner Michelle Spears, appointed to the board, and I'm a cybersecurity researcher.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Donovan. I am Commissioner Terry's appointee, and I'm a senior technical business analyst.
Hi, my name is David Kemp. I am Commissioner Larry Johnson's appointee, and I am a project manager.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Susan Nugent, a CEO appointee and a retired public policy analyst.
Thank you.
My name is Sonali Sandane. I'm also a CEO appointee, and my background is elementary education.
Thank you.
I am Catherine Tipton, also a CEO appointee, and I'm a retired high school English teacher.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sonja Williams. I am a CEO appointee. I am a human resources and DEI consultant.
Thank you.
Robert Dennis, Dana Gaines, and Norman Powell, appointees of Commissioners Cochran Johnson, Patrick and Bradshaw respectively, were unable to join us today. We were established by the governing authority in 2013 and have been meeting monthly since then, including throughout the pandemic. Our charge is to advance humane and healthy treatment of animals, advise the governing authority and animal services on the welfare and treatment of animals, assist with implementation of a long-term plan that improves practices, service delivery, efficiency, and facilities, identify strategies to improve the lives of animals, assist in securing grants and funding, and advance cooperation and communication to create a comprehensive safety net of services, life-saving measures, and animal population management activities.
So we're gonna jump right in. As you know, Dekalb's Animal Services has been under heightened pressure for at least 2 years. That pressure manifests itself largely in shelter operations area, but can be seen at every step along the way. A comprehensive approach of addressing both symptoms and causes is paramount. The good news is that there are common sense solutions that will effectively address this crisis short and long term. They are: build more space, increase staffing and training, support families and their pets in need, prevent more homeless pets, reduce length of stay of court-held dogs. And here's how we got to these recommendations. Three major, yeah.
I have a question. Can we question as we go? What
Well, we were gonna explain how we got to each recommendation, so we have lots of graphics and data to show you, and we may just answer your question in
okay.
the process.
You know, my
Sure.
one question that I would have to ask, and I think I asked earlier, was when you talk of building more space, and of course, that's what the new facility, when we built that, an $11 million facility, it was because we needed a new facility, we needed more space, et cetera, et cetera. How do you determine the cap? How do you determine the space that is needed? And whether or not, once we build that space, the population will not exceed the space that we're adding. And that goes with staffing and training. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
No.
Yeah, so if that's in there, that's one of the things that I would like to know.
It is, actually. Thank you for asking that, and that is a
Okay.
central question. And we wanted to go through some data to support that, to show that.
Okay.
So we'll get to it. I have a lot of data assessment to show you to support that, and so we'll be jumping slides. Huh? Not too long. Yeah. Me?
Yeah, because, we have about 9 more minutes.
Yeah, our presentation would be about 10 to 12 minutes. But
I'm sure we can push hers back, that's no problem.
okay.
Okay.
So may I go on? Okay, thank you. All right, and I promise to answer those questions, and I think they will be answered as we go on. So the 3 major factors have contributed to a significant strain on the operations of the shelter, and those 3 factors are, as you see here, economic and social conditions have increased the number of animals impounded and simultaneously reduced the number of adoptions. The number of court-held animals, the vast majority of which are large dogs, has increased dramatically, and the length of time those animals are held in the system has increased dramatically as well. The wonderful new shelter, which opened in 2017, which all of its many attributes was not built to meet the past, existing, or anticipated intake. So taken together, today we have almost 3 times the number of dogs the shelter was built to serve. The unrelenting influx of animals and declining adoption and rescue rates, while we are holding over 150 dogs for the courts, led us to the conclusion that we must build or find more space to meet the growing demands of our growing county.
So let's look at those other factors at the beginning of the process. Most calls for service come from citizens seeking information or help with an animal situation. The enforcement team fields about 750 calls per month, and these numbers have remained fairly consistent except during the pandemic. Most of these calls turn into cases, which require follow-up by field officers. By far, the majority of these cases relate to stray animals. Some of them are impounded. And some of these cases involve more serious neglect and cruelty, improperly confined animals, dangerous animals, or animals at large, which could trigger a citation and impoundment. Calls for service are highly concentrated in about half Dekalb zip codes, mine being one of them. Compared to census data, these areas are also economically challenged and are the areas where the least level of veterinary care is available, or for this subject, a service desert. This highlights another of our recommendations around targeting access to resources for families with pets experiencing difficult times. Following impounded pets into the shelter, we have another data set to share. We'll start with a review of intake data. Intake represents the number of animals impounded at the shelter. Except for the period of time when the Department of Agriculture closed the shelter for 10 weeks last year, intake has stayed fairly consistent over time. And to support the point that the shelter was built without the past, present, or future total demand in mind, let's compare the last 6 years' intake to the previous 5 years. Again, a steady intake over time. And finally, here's a line graph that depicts the proposed and ultimately built maximum capacity for dogs in the new shelter at 221. Despite the data at the time we were planning the new shelter showing the average daily population of dogs and peak population of dogs during that period greatly exceeding the proposed maximum capacity.
The same findings hold from 2019 forward. The 3 graphs here depict the capacity levels of the shelter compared to average daily population. The bottom band shows the built capacity. The middle band depicts the expanded capacity gained by cutting the kennels in half. And then the top band depicts the same comparison, but where capacity has been supplemented by the use of crates and cages lining the walls and rooms intended for other purposes. Life in a cage is inadequate at best. Because of the nature of our intake, as well as the high numbers of court-held dogs and lengthy stays, much of this space originally dedicated to cats is now being used by dogs, thereby reducing the area available to temporarily house cats. Another way to look at it is average daily population exceeds our built capacity by 380 spaces. Now let's look at the distinctive factors associated with impounded animals. Looking at our intake components, reflecting the calls for service and cases, stray animals make up the largest component of total intake, followed by adoption returns, animals seized, and animals surrendered. Before the pandemic, our outcome model looked more like 35 to 40% adoptions, 25 to 30% transfer to a rescue organization, and 10 to 15% return to owner. Since the pandemic, these opportunities for our animals have dropped pretty significantly. Staffing is also a huge challenge for the entire animal services operation. Compensation is low, the work is very difficult in several aspects, and turnover is very high. The enforcement team is understaffed and has a high turnover and attrition rate, as you see here. The same is true at the shelter, although having a higher rate of positions filled has an even higher turnover rate than enforcement does. One of the most unfortunate misrepresentations of this work has been parodied for decades as the dog catcher. This work requires knowledge, intelligence, good people and animal skills, emotional maturity, investigative skills, and more. We also bring forward recommendations in that area as well.
Shifting now to court-held animals. While there have always been court-held animals, the numbers have skyrocketed over the last 2 years. One factor that has caused the numbers to skyrocket is the fact that there are multiple animals that are part of very few cases. We've noticed that many of these cases that have come forward to the court involve breeding operations. Breeding operations. Currently, there are 159 animals held by the courts. These animals are held as a part of just 32 cases against individuals who have cases brought against them for cruelty and or neglect or both. In the recent months, motions have been brought against for 8 cases to actually be dismissed. Dogs held by the court stay in the shelter system 9 times longer than the average stay for all dogs that are part of the shelter system. This is a very expensive arrangement for Dekalb citizens. The number or the cost of the cases that are before the court now is almost $2 million. That's a big number, $2 million. And, excuse me, I lost my place just a moment. I want to make sure I get that together. But together, these factors led to our legislative recommendations. All that said, that holding animals for court purposes presents us with a choice that can be reimagined, and in doing so, can save the county a great deal of money and save the animals from a great deal of harm that has come to them. The good news, however, is this: there are common sense solutions to this problem, and Sonali alluded to that earlier in her part of the presentation. In brief, the county could implement a policy to encourage the owners to surrender at intake. Or they could also use one or both of the options available from 2 state laws that are in place today. Or the commission could pass legislation to simply request the owners to post a bond for the care of their animals, or have them surrender them at the time of intake, as I just said. And the county could, by doing these things, the county could actually save, as I said, a great deal of money, and also keep the animals from experiencing harm from staying inside of a shelter for such a long period of time. The Solicitor General and the District Attorney offices also have their own solutions to these problems. This is also one of our recommendations. Thank you.
So, our recommendations are common sense solutions, plans for a better tomorrow. Our first recommendation is to create more space. Space to meet current and future needs through temporary space soon and an expansion of the current shelter. Our second recommendation is to increase staffing levels, compensation, training, and professional development. Third recommendation is to provide support to families and their pets in need through targeted pop-up clinics, resource centers, and other help. Our fourth recommendation is to prevent more homeless pets through enforcement of existing ordinances, but also passing new legislation to regulate breeding and requiring licenses to conduct the business transaction around breeding. Lastly, our fifth recommendation is to reduce the length of stay of court-held dogs by policy through one of the state's 2 laws created to support local governments in this area, and to pass legislation to create an automatic process to be implemented by the Animal Services.
Finally, we want to share with you the highlights of a survey of DeKalb County citizens in April of this year. This survey was conducted in 10 large urban counties across the nation. The DeKalb data was extracted from the largest survey, but the number of respondents was high enough to maintain the high confidence level of the full survey. Specific to pet owners, which represents about 60% of DeKalb citizens, 22% wanted but could not afford microchipping of their pets. 20% wanted but could not afford fence repair or placement. And over the past 3 years, 72% wanted but could not afford access to things like pet food, veterinary care, microchipping, pet behavior, and education training. Of all DeKalb citizens, 66% believed it was important for public officials to increase the public funding for the shelter, and only 18% believed it was unimportant. 92% believed there was a need for additional funding for animal services, and 69% thought the funding should come from means other than voluntary contributions. Unique to DeKalb County was that the people of the lower and upper levels of income were most supportive to assist pet owners in need, although all income levels were supported. In most communities, higher income people are less supportive of these programs.
So that concludes our presentation today. We appreciate your kind attention to this and ask for your support in implementing these recommendations. As you can tell, we believe that if the resolution before you is approved and its resolves are converted into action, the effects on the shelter system, our citizens, and their pets will be very beneficial to the health, safety, and quality of life we all aspire to. We're happy to answer any questions you have, and we're most eager to hear from you as well. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for